Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Kitchings Table here, November the 8th, 2022. And before I get deep into the show, I need to let you know that today is a very special day for me simply because it is the day that I was brought into this world. Yes, that's right. Today is my birthday. So, you know, it's a very special and warm day for me, and I'm looking forward to all the things that will come my way. I've already gotten several great messages from people, and family members have shared their thoughtfulness, and we're just happy to be with you today, and look forward to this day. But we are always grateful that Awesome Radio WBISLP is our format for bringing you to the show today, and we thank you. So we look forward to the opportunity to be with you today. And that light, man, that light is real hot this morning. So I'm gonna try to tone it down a little bit because it is super hot. There we go. And have a great show for you today. And you can always catch us here on WBIS LP 106.9 FM, YouTube, Roku, Facebook Live, GPAC 23 are the platforms you can find the show. So we bring you today's show, and it's ironic that so many things are happening on this day, November the 8th, 2022. We're celebrating birth, but we're also celebrating the fact that the balance of America is at hand today. The fact that we are in this situation, this election time, a time where people who take for granted the liberty of being an American, living in a democracy rather than a dictatorship or autocracy. They are taking this for granted and wanting to make it something different than what it is. We are the proudest, the strongest, the freest nation on the planet. However, it appears that if one faction of people have it their way, things will be considerably different than the way we know things to be here in this country right now. A lot of people have died for this country to be what it is. And that goes on both sides of the spectrum, black, white, and everything else in between, yellow and brown, red. Everyone has contributed to the growth of this nation. Please don't let anybody make you believe or think any different. Those people who are wanting to turn the clock back, to turn things backwards, to minimize, compromise what we've had, what we have, don't let them take that from what you believe and what you feel, because everyone contributed, served, gave blood, gave time, gave whatever over all these years of discourse and violence, peace, love, the whole ball of wax. Today, everything lies in the balance. Unlike any other election in the history of this country, and there have been some outstanding election days, there have been some surprises, there have been some days where things worked out for the betterment of the country. But today is the day where the balance of this country lies in the wake of what's going to be happening. And if, for whatever reason, we do not get the necessary, I'm choosing my words very carefully today. If we don't get the necessary voting done in order to maintain a democratic society, a democratic country, things will be decisively different going into 2023. They've already done that over the past couple of years. Gerrymandering, there always seems to be a reason to gerrymander because people, let's just be honest, want to cheat, want to be dishonest, don't want it to be a fair election. They want it to be swayed. Put your finger on the scale so it can go their way. Flooded these people who are running for office with all kinds of money, and we've heard them say all kinds of untruthful things at times, things that are hurtful, things are just misinformation, all because somebody wants the advantage so that they can have it their way. Money and power. Well, if you vote today, vote for what will keep this country in its democratic and democracy posture. Let not the people who are just asking you to vote convince you that it's for other reasons. And there have been folks who believe that, the Democratic Party has not always looked out for Black people. And at times, that could be a challenge and has been a challenge. But the question is, do you want another faction of people to be in control and you lose more than what you've gained? Is that where we want to be? So this is where we are. This is probably one of the most critical elections that we've seen, and everybody needs to get out and vote. And that's just the bottom line. So today, I wanted to just share with you here on WBIS LP 106.9 how the election and the elections of this country have become very scientific. There has been a lot of energy, resources, both economic and labor, put into an effort to scientifically understand what is going on with the elections and how they factor into the results. And this all started, if you remember, in 2000, when we had the election of the presidency between Al Gore and George W. Bush. The election was going pretty smoothly until there was a hiccup in the state of Florida. They had to do a recount. They had to put, I'll never forget when Dan Rather put the results on hold and said, wait a minute, we're going to have to go back to Florida. There seems to be a problem. Since that time, those people who are inclined from a scientific standpoint to understand better how elections work, how the policies and procedures for gathering the data for who people are voting for, who people are, the communities, who's registered, you name it. It's all tied up. It's in some very, very scientific information and the gathering of that information has been truly remarkable. And the fact that they are now utilizing scientific ways to look into what's going on in our elections and the secure ways of keeping the elections safe and give it integrity just goes to show you that the criticalness of having these elections turn out and be fair and secure are important. In addition to that, making sure that people are registered properly. The information that I'll be sharing with you today talks about improper and proper registration. That can be a reason why ballots are rejected. People weren't registered properly. The ballot was not completed properly. And as has turned out after the 2020 election, when those people who want to say that the election was stolen, it's an interesting dichotomy. Now, on that ballot, there were more than just the president on that ballot. There were other congressional and state officials that were on that ballot. However, none of the results for those individuals, congressional, state, are in question. No one says their election was stolen. No one says there were improprieties in those elections. Those elections seem to have been okay. You don't hear people talking about that was stolen. The only thing you hear people talk about that was being stolen was the presidential election, because you have an egotistical man who was not being reelected for office. And he told you before that election even happened, when he was asked the question, will you accept the results? And his answer was, we'll see. That set the tone for letting you know that unless the results favor him, he was not going to accept them, and he was going to find a way to say that something was wrong. But everybody else on the ballot, they were good. So the scientificness of what we're looking at today started after the 2000 election. They came up with a commission. Congress came up with a commission to, look into the voting fairness. They came up with a fair voting commission to look into going forward the ways that people are voting and registering to make sure everything was secure and above board. They've put in much time and effort into creating the voting process, voting equipment, collecting the data before and after, registration data, people whose voting data, Census Bureau data. They've done all this work to ensure that a democracy that's based on the voting of the people stands up against those people who choose and want to sway this election and future elections in a way that unless they win, they're going to always say there was some improprieties. Unless they win, they're going to always say something was stolen. Unless they win, they're never going to be satisfied with the results. And I equivalent that to the fact of, how do you teach your children about being fair and honest and accepting a loss when they compete? because what this teaches the children of those people and children in general is that if you lose, you have the right to challenge the loss. Now, I'm sure many of us watch sports on TV every weekend. You never see the teams who play the games or the coaches who play the games challenge their teams losing. They may have some issues with some of the decisions made on the field with some of the penalties or whatever, but I never see coaches talk about the game was stolen from us. Somebody took something from me. They didn't do it well. When I was growing up, my father always cautioned me about using the word cheat. He didn't like that word, and he put it in me not to use the word cheat because that is a very dangerous word. It's a very ugly word when you say somebody cheated. That means you did it on purpose. You went out of your way to find a way to win. You wanted to win at all costs. And that's what we're facing today, November 8th, 2022. People who want to win at all costs. They will say whatever they need to say to convince you that other people who are running for office are not fair, will not be honest, will not be truthful. Yet the people who are throwing the stones are the ones, in my opinion, who definitely are doing most of the damage. And if you keep up with the news, you see that people make comments, very ugly comments about minorities, even though they're a minority themselves. You hear people talk about the way it's going to be, what's going to happen no matter what. You know, they're changing the rules for elections under the guise of, well, we want it to be safe and secure. It was safe and secure up until 2020. It was safe and secure up until that time. There was nothing wrong with the way it was being done. Yes, it could be improved, but to say, well, you know, you can't do it this way because you can stuff the ballot, you can do it that way because it's going to be not fair. You know, they used to allow drop boxes. You know, remember when they pulled all the drop boxes off the street and only had one or two, where a community of hundreds of thousands of people had to try to get their mail-in ballot to that one drop box. You know, you close your election office door slots to close them at 5 when everybody's gone, and if you don't submit your drop mail-in ballot during work hours, they're not going to accept them because you can't get them in. The drop boxes are closed. They're moved. There are no drop boxes. All of these things have occurred because the people who want to have all the power have done the things and are doing the things to make it work. Even so much that the Postmaster General started tampering with mailing opportunities through the mail with machinery that would bring mail and bring these ballots to election offices for counting. Any and every way they've tried to discourage and obstruct. So let me share with you what I found in the nonprofit company called the Pew Trust. The Pew Trust and they're individuals who's scientists, political scientists, people who follow politics and voting and are really into this scientific knowledge of how things are working. Data is critical to what they find, so that when they publish their findings, it has been researched and thoroughly researched, so that when they present it, they're 99.9% sure and accurate with what they're sharing. But they gave a list of indicators that factor into voting, that have factored into voting since 2000. So we're talking about 22 years, basically. The Congress passed the Fair Voting Act in 2002, after the 2000 election that George W. Bush won. But they've got these indicators that give you insight into what they're looking at, what they're slicing and dicing to find out what makes things work and what makes things tick. And I found it very interesting that you have people who do this type of work, research, collecting of data. And when you think about people who do surveys, and we know that oftentimes when you see people out there canvassing malls or grocery stores or wherever they are, canvassing to do surveys, although we always find ways maybe to participate or not, that data is important to help determining information that can be very, very helpful in determining outcomes and the reason why some things are going like they are in our elections. So the Pew Trust and their group of individuals, I'll just say political scientists who look for this information, they came up with these 17 indicators that they gather, research, discuss, and put out a report on what's going on with our political races. And when you look at this, and when you hear the titles to these indicators, keep in mind that each one of these, they have spent intensive amounts of time gathering it, looking at it backwards and forward, so that they can provide this information, so that when you, like tonight, when you hear these analysts give you the results and why this went that way and why things went that way and projections, it's because of this type of data being collected to help give you indications. Mind you that it can't give you all the indications because you don't know how some people, especially new registered voters, may be voting. Young people, you're not sure how they may be voting. They could be the balance or tip the balance in favor of one party or the other, for one candidate or the other. And as I read through some of this, and they talked about, registration, and when we hear people talk about, are you registered to vote? The one thing I gather from their reports in the registration, the vote part, is this: if your registration form is inaccurate, if it is not complete, if there is anything wrong with it when you turn it in and you don't know that it's inaccurate, and you think you can go vote, and you vote and your vote gets kicked out because of your registration form being inaccurate, that counts. And again, when they start talking about, when the people who are trying to do these elections, you got people sitting at the election offices looking at who's doing what, intimidating voters, intimidating election workers, because they believe that the people who have them doing this are right in what they're saying and doing because they want things to go their way. It has made our elections very dangerous. But when those registration forms are off for the slightest thing, and you can't vote, or your vote doesn't count and gets kicked out, a lot of things can go wrong. So let me just share with you the 17 indicators that they highlight in this process of gathering this data for elections performance. And this is called the Elections Performance Index. And it started out with some governmental offices, but all of this data and information has since been transferred to Massachusetts Institute of Technology Election Data and Science Lab in 2018. And they just gather all this information. So you can imagine the computers they have that's gathering all this information, compiling it, sorting it, categorizing it, cataloging it, the whole thing. So here's the 17 indicators. Starting with data completeness. Is the data complete? Disability or illness related voting problems. Disability or illness. If you are a disabled person and you can't get to the voting booth and you must submit a mail-in ballot, they are looking at those problems. Mail ballots rejected. Mail ballots rejected. It only takes one thing to be off on your mail-in ballot to be off and be not counted. I've never heard of a ballot being kicked out at the places, the live voting booths. That would be interesting to see if someone, had a mistake or something and that ballot got kicked out. What do they do about it? But with the mail-in ballots, it just gets rejected and probably put aside in a box. Mail ballots unreturned. Ballots go out, they don't come back in. Military and overseas ballots rejected. See, all these numbers, and that's what we're talking about, numbers compiled help make up the results. Military and overseas ballots. So if you're in the military and you're out of the country, or you are citizens and you're out of the country and you want to affect or you want to vote, you have to complete that ballot. Military and overseas ballots unreturned. Online registration available. Post-election audit required. Provisional ballots cast. Provisional ballots. So just think about it. You have mail-in ballots, military and overseas ballots, provisional ballots, disability or illness ballots, provisional ballots rejected, registration or absentee ballot problems. Registration or absentee ballot. And if you're voting as an absentee and your ballot is incorrect and there's a problem, all these things get tossed out and put to the side. They're not going to count anything that's not correct. So if you're not correct, it's not going to get counted. Registrations rejected. If you did not properly complete your registration form, you are not a registered voter. Thereby you cannot vote. Residual vote rate, turnout, voter registration rate, voting information lookup tools available, and finally, they look at voting wait time. How much time is taking you to vote? in person and or by mail. If you go to, again, if the places where you want to drop off your ballot at the election offices are closed and there's no place where you can drop that ballot, that's one thing. If you put your ballot in the United States Postal Mail Service, that is probably the surest way for that ballot to reach the election office to be counted, versus if you can't do it at a drop-off box. Put it in the mail and let the post office deliver it to your elections office. So those were the 17 indicators. And we'd like to thank you for joining us here on the Kitchings Table, here on WBISLP 106.9 FM, YouTube, Facebook, Roku, GPAC 23, other online formats and platforms you can find our show. And the shows are recorded, so you can always just go back and listen to them. And here at the Kitchings Table, we are always interested in bringing you information and news and facts about things going on across the gamut of life, no matter what it may be. And we just hope that something that we bring to you sticks and turns the light on and makes you feel good about knowing one more thing that you didn't know yesterday that you know today. So today we're talking about, of course, it's election day. But this election, unlike others, will be so critical in the outcome of our democracy going forward that it must be one of those things that we have to have democracy to remain in place. Otherwise, the landscape of the American democracy as we know it is going to be changed, at least for the next 2 years. If they return another GOP candidate to the office of presidency, things are going to turn again. They've already turned from a judicial standpoint with a number of, I guess, GOP favored judges on the bench at all levels, city, municipal, as they call it, state and federal. So when you put a whole hand on those scale, so that scale pops up like like a kid's on a seesaw, the weight goes up and down. When you become that hand that presses down to make sure you get all the benefits, everything is set to go your way, that's not democracy, because somebody is not being heard or counted for. So that's where we are. But as I go back to my research on this Pew Trust information, so I gave you the 17 indicators. And then as I looked into some of the things that they put into this election performance index, and I got to this because I thought about the word index. And from this perspective, index is a way to count or to assemble figures in order to do an assessment. So this index that the Pew Charitable Trust did in 2016, ironically, it's called the EPI, Election Performance Index. And in this report, it's about a 100-page report. And it talks about many, many things, how the EPA was developed, comprehensive understanding of election policy and administration, U.S. Census Bureau as a data collector, survey of the performance of American elections. That's another one of the chapters here. Then it talks about United States Elections Project. And then it goes into the indicators and details. Data completions, disability, and each one of them have a data source, a coding convention, and some type of comparison over time to talk about how things have gone over the years. And you just talk about all of these different indicators and what they mean and what they do and how they affect the outcomes and what information they've gathered and what they've looked at from state to state. And when they do these gerrymandering maps so that the vote can be swayed for one group, it makes for some very difficult times. Fortunately, there are judges who take their job seriously, who are not into the politics of it. They're about the law, justice, truth. So when the politicians come out with these gerrymandering maps, because they keep changing every time there's an opportunity to change so that the power of the vote can be swayed for a certain party. And it's ironic that I don't think I've ever heard the Democrats doing gerrymandering maps to make sure that they get things their way. Most of the time, it's the Republicans who, I don't know if they feel inadequate. They just want all the power. They want everything so they can, get all the tax breaks. They can get all the other breaks that they feel they can be afforded. This is part of what that election performance index report is talking about when they talk about the factors involved in elections. Because as I stated, when there are discrepancies, when the discrepancies will affect the outcomes for an election, so that the next time it's time to vote in a major election, you've had politicians see they get in office and then they start playing with the law. They get elected so they can tamper or play or modify. I won't say tamper, let's say modify the laws as they stand on the books, i.e. Roe versus Wade, that has stood for 50 plus years. Now you have a faction who want to put their finger on the scale. And these types of elections, whereby you get politicians in office who are going to collectively make things difficult or make it a challenge for the entire country. Because not everybody sees it their way, of course. And not everybody feels the way they feel, of course. But it's only to satisfy that small population, that small group who wants it their way. And truth be told, I feel that a lot of times these people are not above board, or they want to sway things in their direction. They want to use misinformation as a means of controlling. So when we talk about an organization putting together this kind of document to make sure we have information to acknowledge and make sure we don't do some of the things that have been done in the past, to make sure everything is codified and systematically documented. It's done because information is a way of controlling and moving things forward. If the equipment is not where it needs to be, reports like this can help people create new equipment or better equipment. To want to go back to hand counting ballots is just not an option anymore. Too many people in this country, it would take too long. We must rely on accurate technology in order to count ballots. That's why the completion of that ballot is so critical, so that the machine can read it correctly and it can be reported correctly. And whether they like it or not, the results are going to be results. And when the results don't favor them, they want to whine about it. They want to say something's wrong. So we'll see how many people claim something was wrong if they don't win, because it can't be all the machinery in all the states that is wrong. But when you want to win so bad, you know, that's a very sad thing. You want to win so bad that you will go the extra mile to make it about everything else but you just not winning. Folks didn't want you. That's what it comes down to in an election. You know, people outvoted your faction, so they just were not in favor of having you represent them. And that's all you are, is a representative of the people. And many times they don't represent the people and the wishes of the people because the politics. And you know what the one thing that is connected to politics helps to make that finger on the scales even heavier? The one thing that they talk about now is the reason why they're voting the way they will vote is because of inflation. And as I brought to you a few weeks back, inflation, and this was brought out by a congressional member, Katie Porter, is not that the government is the root of all the inflation problems. It's not so much the government. When we had the COVID situation, it caused a lot of things to be disrupted. And in trying to get back to some stability and normalcy, the things that were disrupted, it just really caused things to be out of whack. However, when a congressional member challenges someone who represents corporate America, when that congressional representative identifies the fact that corporations are taking advantage of people by using this time of saying inflation, they're taking a heavy portion of the inflation revenue that they're making and causing it to be put back into their pockets. Not because it has to be, it's because they choose to do it. They choose for inflation to be what it is so they can make more money, so they can have more money. So they're taking advantage of those people who have little because they don't care about who it hurts. They just want to make what they can. And then when you talk about these stockholders and boards voting because they want more return on investment. They want their dividends to go up. Everything is built on whether or not that money factor is working for me or against me. And you have multiple levels of high income people. You have multiple levels of millionaires, multiple level of billionaires. Everybody's tiered, and there's little care, concern about people who need help the most. Those who have want more, and those who have more want more than what they have. However, hope is not lost because there are people who want to do what's good and right. And there are people who want to help. A lot of people want to help. We don't hear the stories about everyone who's out here trying to help. We hear about everybody who's trying to take. We don't hear about those who are trying to give. And if these politicians truly cared, they get health care at a very cheap rate. They make enough money to pay more than they pay, if they pay anything, but they want theirs for free almost, or at no cost or minimal cost. But the people who need that, they can't get health care. So this whole political landscape and equation is built on money and power. Those who say they represent you don't always do it. I wish we had more representatives like Katie Porter in Congress, because then they could do their jobs like they were sent there to do. Go do some good. What would a millionaire need to do with being an elected official? What would a millionaire? I'm already a millionaire. Why do I need to have a political office? Greed and power, not service, not help and service to others. Greed and power. So you can look out for those who look like you. And I'm not talking about the color of their skin. I'm talking about those who have the resources. You look out for those who have it like you, who can benefit you. Excuse me. So as we prepare to close out our show today, just keep in mind that there are organizations, and you will hear the term watchdog groups. These organizations are critical to the future of our democracy and making sure that we have a democracy, because they are the ones who let you know when folks are not doing things the correct way. They gather the information, gather the data, put it back out, make you accountable. Make you accountable. And as long as we have these groups who will make others accountable, democracy will live on. But again, November 8th, 2022, a very, very critical day in the political landscape of the United States of America. A democracy that is supposed to be for the people, not some of the people, for the people in totality, so that we all benefit. We all can benefit. So the more this country becomes diverse, the more it has diverse political leaders who engage to fight for what their constituents believe is right, as long as we have people who are doing things that are correct for the goodness, for the good, the just, fairness, for truth, honesty in our country, the better off we're going to be. But again, for those who want the power and the greed all to themselves, this is what we're fighting for in this election. And this will happen again in 2 years, in 2024, when it's time to vote for a new president. And as we continue to pray about outcomes, let us continue to pray for the people who are out there fighting on the front lines to keep democracy a vital, valid, and formidable part of this country's history and its legacy. Because if things change, we're all in trouble. You've been listening and watching the Kitchings Table here on Awesome Radio, WBISLP 106.9 FM. We are eternally grateful to the staff and management, Ms. Akila Thigpen, the CEO and president of Awesome Radio. We thank her for allowing us to have a platform to share our views and thoughts with you. Catch us every Tuesday morning, unless something goes wrong. I get sick or something, as I did a couple of weeks ago. Catch us every Tuesday morning right here on WBISLP Awesome Radio for the Kitchings Table with me, your host, Earl Kitchings, so that we can bring you some additional information. Next Tuesday when we come back, we'll have the results of today, and we'll see just how much the landscape of the American democracy has changed and will change after today's election. Until then, I wish everyone a happy and safe week. Do something positive and good for someone else, and make a difference in the lives of the people you love. Until next time, we're going to say bye-bye. Take care. Have a great week.